Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today we're taking a kind of a review look and initial look at Stalker 2. This game came out for PC, Game Pass, and also over on Xbox. And this is like a first-person shooter survival game where we find ourselves in alternative history, where Chernobyl created what we call the Zone. It's an area of dangerous anomalies, changing creatures. Of course, they're definitely more dangerous now. And people, too, can also be the most dangerous part. And there can be quite a few areas with a lot of people present, depending on the faction or group that they're a part of. First things you realize is that you're going to die pretty often as you're learning about the game, because the game isn't going to be holding your hand. And some of this is simply just going to be trial and error. Sometimes, too, you're just going to make a misstep. You're going to have to reload again, or all of your guns you've all fired, and now you got to take time to reload, and that's going to take you down. This, honestly, too, is more of a simulation, honestly. Kind of think of like PUBG or like Escape from Tarkov. And it's going to feel kind of a lot like that. You'll probably also recognize the inventory systems. But the atmosphere of the game is lonely and dark. It's hard to trust people. It's very difficult to see, and also you get to see how people are living, how the zone has really kind of changed what people are like and what's available. There's not a lot of power. Food is fairly plentiful, which is kind of surprising, but like nobody has, like a perfect lifestyle paradise, right? Everybody is surviving. There's always risk out there. The lighting, too, in the game is also pretty dim, so you're going to be using your flashlight quite a bit. Nighttime is, well, you got to be careful. The gunplay and stuff is also more simulatory too. You got to worry about deterioration for your weapons. You got to worry about your guns jamming. Your stuff wears down. Your gear too that you're wearing actually wears down. You got to worry about bleeding. You got to worry about loss of health, radiation, getting knocked unconscious even. Between all of this, you're broke, and you don't really start with any gear, and you have breaking weapons. That's basically the start of the game. Your first little weapon that you have is a little pistol, which is certainly better than nothing. But yeah, between all that, it's a mess. And there's anomalies too, and some of them can just kill you instantly, or you can run out of supplies. It's difficult, and it's going to be kind of a long game. But again, for those of us that like first-person shooter survivals, this is going to be really fun for us. So let's talk about the good. The devs do a good job creating the world and making it immersive through the game mechanics, the lighting, the sound too is really well done. The world too also feels handcrafted, even though it's an open world. It's kind of what we remember or reminiscent of some of the older games. A lot of the quests too, they also feel handcrafted. They don't feel super janky. Of course, there's some of the side quests that are pretty, uninteresting, or they're just fetch quests or whatever, but you're generally doing these just for money. They're not actually really a part of the story too much. But there's others too where you just happen upon them, and it's like, oh wow, we're starting a side quest right here. And what am I going to do? Because it's going to have an effect on the people around you, or maybe even with some of the factions, or how it's going to play out in, down the road into the game. Overall, the gunplay is really realistic. There's a wide range of weapons and different weapon platforms. There's even some kind of unique and special weapons like RPGs. And then there's also different types of ammo. So you have regular, armor-piercing. You can have slugs. There's also different types of grenades, too. I've seen 2 so far. And, yeah, there's a lot of things that you can work toward. There's different attachments, there's scopes, there's also upgrades for those weapons too that can change or dictate like how much it weighs. Maybe you can have a weight reduction, which is great because you're constantly managing that weight all the time, just like a regular Bethesda game. Also too, the world is huge. The game is 60 square kilometers. You could think of it as like the size of Far Cry 5. And the missions are going to take you through those zones. And each zone is kind of a little different. Each zone is, free, so to speak. Other zones are dictated and controlled by different factions or different groups. And, yeah, there's always conflict and kind of tension going on between all of the people. And then, of course, there's creatures too. There's different creatures, there's different anomalies you're going to be engaging with. And yeah, each zone kind of has its own flavor, if you will, so far. And I've been to 3 different zones through my 15 hours. The starter zones are going to start you out. They're going to be kind of like the prologue of the game. They're going to get you started, help you learn the ropes a little bit. Though some of that stuff you're still going to have to learn yourself. You're going to have to, like, I still had issues initially learning how to put on attachments, open my inventory, um, figure out what consumables helped me with radiation or with stamina loss or bleeding. So I kind of had to learn all of those things, but it doesn't take too long to figure out. It's fairly intuitive. If you have to, there is stuff on YouTube. You can look it up right away, and there's also some already playthroughs too if you get stuck on some of the missions as you're learning the ropes. But yeah, as you go through different zones, there's different creatures that you have to deal with. Sometimes there's more of them. I had a facility where there was like 15 to 20 guys in there that were constantly shooting at me and grenades going off. And let me tell you, it was a pretty long firefight. There's also areas too where just like random boars and dogs and whatever else shows up, and now you got to deal with those. I think the biggest pack of dogs I dealt with was 8 dogs, which, yeah, they took me down. I didn't make it out of there. The exploration overall in the game is pretty rewarding. There's stashes all over the place. Um, there's generally these stashes are puzzles. Some of them are easy enough to figure out, but some of them honestly too are pretty advanced, and some of them I haven't figured out yet. But like an example, it can be simply just finding the stash behind a bush or in a hole in the ground, or even working around on the outside, looking through a window, shooting the lock off of the door, and walking back around to go through the door and then getting into the stash. Some stashes too are up high where it's kind of challenging to get up there. You have to do some parkour and jumping and hopping around without dying if you fall off to be able to get to a stash, and anything else in between. Sometimes too, for doing missions, you get rewarded with a new stash that gets posted on your map that you can later go to and find out what's there. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not. But all of these, you'll be able to find enough food, generally speaking, to stay alive. You'll also find some med kits, which is nice. And then you're always going to be able to find enough ammo, but it may not be the type that you want. So having a wide range of different firearms that shoot different types of ammo or sizes or cartridges is going to be nice. That'll help you get through the game. For your weapons and gear, you can upgrade stuff. And we're talking some serious money. Even just a gas mask or something for radiation can cost tens of thousands of dollars to actually upgrade. And I'm at a point too where I can't even really upgrade everything on my gear. I have found people to upgrade everything so far for the weapons that I have, if I have enough money, which again, that's pretty expensive too. Even the repairs can be expensive. And of course, as you upgrade it, the repairs get more expensive. As far as I know, you can't learn to repair it yourself. You have to pay for it every single time, or find new guns to shoot with. But ultimately, if your gear wears down, it's less effective. And if your guns wear down too much, well, they're going to start jamming on you, or really not even really function at all. And of course, that's an issue in a firefight, and you never know when those are going to happen. So yeah, through the entire 15 hours, some of the smaller stashes, yeah, they do feel pretty repetitive. But again, if you're looking for gear, you're going to be, or resources, you're happy that they're there. But the larger structures, they still have unique big stashes. Sometimes there's certain keys you need to find, which can be anywhere, and you have to be, to get the door open to get into the stash. And then sometimes too, there's big firefights in order to get to the stash. Sometimes too, you'll just come upon random patrols as you're just going about the world. So, yeah, the bigger stashes, the bigger buildings are actually worth going through because there's generally a lot of material there. A lot of resources, consumables, different types of ammo, rifle, cartridges that maybe you're looking for, which is pretty nice. Overall, the story is interesting. There's always a new faction so far, even through 15 hours. There's new factions that I'm finding. There's new people that I'm engaging with. There's new vendors. Again, I've only been in 3 zones so far. The lesser zone where you start, I've basically been through that entire thing. And the other two zones I've kind of touched on, but still, there's probably another 12 zones that I got to work through. Maybe? Yeah, 10 or 12. There's a lot of area out there to cover. All of the buildings and structures. And again, you don't have to go through everything. But again, if you're low on resources, you can probably at least find something, which is nice. In the bigger buildings, there's usually side quests in there. And you can just happen across people too. The enemies are definitely challenging. And I'm playing this on medium difficulty by the way. This isn't even the most challenging. But the enemies can see you from roughly 50 to 75 meters away, which is really far away in a game. Most time, you can be 20 feet away and they still don't necessarily see you. So yeah, stealth is definitely necessary. You need to do some planning. You need to be tactful. Low lighting, of course, not stumbling across cans on the floor or setting off a trap. Like, you got to be careful with what you're doing. And then enemies are going to engage you. As soon as they see you, they're going to be shooting back at you. You can hear those bullets whizzing by, or actually they're going to be hitting you. And enemies, too, if there's multiple of them, they're going to be ambushing. Some will try to keep you engaged while others flank around, and sometimes they actually flank pretty quickly, where they've just literally shot me in the back, and I'm done. And enemies, of course, can hear you, too. So yeah, or see your flashlight in the dark, all of that stuff. So you do have to be aware. You do have to be keen to what's going on. Let's get into the bad of the game. And there definitely is quite a bit of it. A lot of it is graphical. So the optimized graphics, it's pretty bad. We're having dropped frames. We're having anti-aliasing issues. There's no 60 frames per second, even with performance mode. As far as I can see, sometimes we're not even hitting 30 frames. In my opinion, especially during dawn and dusk, when there's shaders and shadows and there's all of that kind of shifting, or we get a weather system pushing in too when it's dawn and dusk. That's just more for the game to render, and it's pretty challenging. The best frames per second are at night, but then again, you can't really see anything anyway, so they're, overall, they're pretty happy with that. So yeah, you're not worried about frames anyway. But yeah, there's texture pop in. I did calculate that roughly from you to about 100 meters out, the game is rendering stuff for you to see. Bigger buildings, bigger structures, hills, that kind of thing. You can see that a heck of a lot further. You can see that, 2, maybe even 300 meters out, which is pretty far. But yeah, the game is trying to render as much as it can, as well as it can. But it seems a little challenging. On Series S, it's going to be brutal. I really wouldn't suggest playing it on Series S, but on Series X, it's pretty good. And on PC, I've heard it's actually the worst, depending on what you have. Is that, again, you got to work through all the drivers and the settings, and it's just kind of a mess. Sometimes, too, for pop-in, you'll get whole trees. Boop. I mean, it's not like right next to you popping in, which is nice. It is, again, about 100 meters, 75 meters away that it's popping in. But it's kind of funny. You can kind of shift over a particular point in the ground and just see trees disappear and reappear. And it kind of breaks that immersion a little bit. There's also shader issues. I've literally had shaders and shadows pushing themselves kind of through the wall while I'm inside a building, as like the sun is shifting and changing position out there and shifting those shadows around. And the game, yeah, it's not quite rendering correctly. Sometimes it's the entire wall looking kind of wonky. We do have blur on a default, but you can't completely turn it off. And I do see this as a disadvantage, especially right now with texture issues, because I feel like it just makes it worse. It's just more of a challenge. So I have it as low as it can go, and I don't notice it too much. But yeah, it does just compound the texture issues in the game. NPCs, some of them are hovering above the ground. Luckily, not too much. Some, too, are like bobbing or almost like jittering up and down in their seat while they're sitting there. Sometimes, too, they're not even facing each other when they're talking to each other, which, again, that reminds me of like Mass Effect 2, which is hilarious. Another issue, if you have stick drift, boy, this game is going to be brutal because there are no dead zones. I mean, as soon as you are shifting that joystick, you're inputting a command in the game. And I've taken some time to test this. And even just walking a beam or a piece of concrete that's up high or kind of like a half gone catwalk, it's challenging because you can pretty easily slip off. And then, well, great, you died, and now you got to start out, do the last 10 minutes over or whatever from your autosave. So that can be pretty frustrating. There's also crashes too. I've had two so far. I've been playing. There's some kind of jittering with the screen and the frames. It'll freeze and then bloop, it's over, right? There's been other times where I've had the game freeze, honestly, too, for quite a few seconds. I mean, we're talking like 5+ seconds where I think the game is just going to crash, but I let it do its thing, and eventually it does come back. So there's some loading issues. Maybe that's RAM issue optimization. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there, but there's issues with that as well. Sometimes, too, there's the audio just disappears. You'll hear music, okay, you'll hear some sound, especially at nighttime. I noticed this, and during dawn and dusk. Daytime, not so much, but sometimes the audio will just suddenly, abruptly cut out. And I don't know if that's intentional. It doesn't sound natural, I'll tell you that much. But that actually happens fairly often throughout the gameplay. Also, too, when bodies are down on the ground and it's not perfectly even, we kind of get that like high frequency or a kind of like mid frequency body flopping sound as it's trying to lay flat on the ground, but physics are kicking in as like an arm is resting on a rock and it's like tweaking out, and you're getting all of those sounds on top of it. We still have that, of course, which is pretty reminiscent of some games. I did have one time where I actually lost consistently frame rate. Now, this was really weird. It started fine, just like what you see on the screen, and then as I was playing, it was consistently I was losing frames, and it was staying that way. No matter what I did, looking up at the sky, looking down at the ground, turning my light off, putting my gun away, it didn't change anything. I was just consistently losing more and more frames, down to maybe 15 frames per second, 15 to 20 frames. It was pretty bad, and so eventually it was getting to a point where I was going to be in a firefight. I didn't want to have to deal with that and waste my time, so I just shut the game off and replayed the next 5 or 10 minutes anyway, as I was likely going to have to do, because yeah, fighting with that amount of frame rate was going to be horrible. It was going to be horrible. So with all of these issues, and there's a few others too, but this is the majority of them, the devs are working on them within 48 hours. They're already working on their first patch, which is great. And I really respect these guys because they completely built this entire game during a war anyway. That they weren't counting on or expecting. They've had to move totally to a whole different country. It interrupted development time, of course, for a while as they moved because of what was going on. So the fact that it's as good as it is and it actually plays, I'm willing to give a little bit of a pass. Of course, it can't stay this way, and I would hope that they're probably working quite vigorously to fix these issues. Especially for PC, it seems to be pretty bad over there. But yeah, I'm willing to give a little bit of a pass for roughly the first month. But like some of these optimization issues, they really need to get fixed. Maybe a couple of months. I don't think their team is overly big, and they even lost some in the war. Let me get a drink of water here. But yeah, I think it's important to remember the context and the circumstances in which they made this game, and to give them a little bit of a pass. But it's a temporary one. It's still a AAA, or excuse me, still a AA title. It is definitely cost them quite a bit of money. This game has been in development for quite some time, and so yeah, there's definitely some things that need to be fixed, and they know what those issues are. They're listening to the community, and they're working on fixing those. Even the dead zone issue with people that have stick drift on their controllers. They're going to be working on implementing that in a further patch down the line. Overall, with everything being considered, I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. There's definitely the things that are really good there. There's a lot of immersion. The gunplay is fun. The simulation is fun. The survival mechanics that are there don't feel overbearing in most cases. Exploring is rewarding. The stories and the missions, whether it's main mission or side quests, most of them feel handcrafted. The world feels good. The weather system, the dynamic different types of enemies and the tactics that they have and the day and night cycle and just having to even worry about tripping over cans so you don't alert the enemy that's nearby. It's impressive. Like they've done a wonderful job building an environment that you can get lost in, but it's held back with all of those graphical issues. So if it didn't have the graphical issues, I'd be giving this an 8 or 9 out of 10. And I would even possibly, after playing more of the game, if it came out sooner, I would honestly be putting this up as maybe potentially definitely some awards for the Game Awards, and nominating it maybe even for Game of the Year. It's honestly that good. It's been the type of first-person shooter survival game I've been wanting to have for a long time. I was hoping that was going to be Starfield, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. And as I'm playing the game, it's reminding me of Fallout 3, Fallout 4, reminding me of New Vegas, where it's like I'm exploring, it's apocalyptic, but like even some of the simulation and some of the mechanics I think are better suited than what Bethesda has made in those games and Obsidian for New Vegas. It is fun. If you've enjoyed Stalker 2, play the game. Okay, you'll probably enjoy it for the most part. If you enjoyed the the kind of the older Fallouts, pick this game up. You'll probably enjoy it. There is a bit of a learning curve for like that first hour, couple of hours, but boy, as you start to play, as you start to learn the game and how to manage things, it's fun. I mean, it's 15 hours. I don't feel bored so far. Some people are, but again, I think it's just partly because it takes so much time to move from place to place, because again, you got to prepare for it. You got to have enough food, you got to have enough ammo, you got to make sure you have enough money, or you're getting enough money from loot or quests or whatever to be able to repair everything. So there is kind of some kind of time consumption there just for managing some stuff in the game. And there is a fast travel system, which is nice, but it's not the type of fast travel system that we're used to. You have to find a guide, and they can basically get you from certain points to other points that you've discovered already in the game. Otherwise, you got to walk the whole time or jog the whole time, whatever. And that takes its toll too. Another thing that I honestly think would be nice to fix, and I didn't mention this before, but it just occurred to me, is some areas in the game, especially in the lesser zone and the garbage zone, is that there are some cliff faces that are a slightly higher elevation that I can't actually jump or climb up in. And so I got to take 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes to run all the way around. And boy, let me tell you, that's frustrating. If I have an open world, having some barriers is okay. But, when they're making me take 10 minutes to go out of my way just to run and jog somewhere and then potentially run into some enemy group and die, and I got to do it all over again, it sucks. So if they could actually fix that, that would be kind of nice. A little bit easier, freedom of movement over large areas or bigger distances would be nice. We do know too that multiplayer is ultimately coming, probably sometime next year. Depends how they fix the game. I really want them to focus on fixing all of the aspects of the game first and fixing a lot of those issues, and then putting out multiplayer after that, because multiplayer is going to have its own issues, right? And they're going to need to be freed up to handle those when that launches. We don't know what form it's going to take, but it could be co-op, it could be PvP, it could be both. We don't know. So I will let you guys know as soon as I hear. So overall, yeah, 6 out of 10 right now. Otherwise, it'd be an 8 or a 9 out of 10. I enjoy this game so much, even with the bugs. And it reminds me again of kind of those Bethesda games. They come with a lot of bugs. They're glitchy. They're unstable. There's problems. But, like, the world, the immersion, like, they sell you on it really good. And it's what makes me keep playing. It's a blast. You can pick it up for $60 if you want a physical copy. Best Buy apparently has some right now. They can ship it to you, or in-store pickup, depending on where you live. Don't expect to get physical copies actually from the publisher. That was just pre-order stuff as far as I know. And they also sold out incredibly fast. And then, of course, there's eBay. So thanks for tuning in, folks. You can always follow me at GamingGarbage22 over at YouTube. There's also Discord, Twitter X, and also Twitch. And if you want to see everything first, just go to Twitch. Follow me there. So you're not able to comment, you're not able to engage, help promote the YouTube channel or anything. But hey, if you prefer it just to get it first, that's okay. Consume it the way you'd like. And with that, folks, I'll see you guys on the next one.